Welcome to Tiff Talks podcast. My name is Tiffany Marie Davis, your host, and I have your co-host here, Miss Ferris C. And we have a very, very special guest today. We have Mr. Jacob Stitch Duran. And if you guys don't know who this man is, you know, he was an MMA and boxing cutman. Jacob Stitch Duran grew up in a migrant camp in San Joaquin Valley of California, where he worked in the field starting at the age of 5. His childhood dreams were to see the world while playing professional baseball, like his hero, Roberto Clemente. Those dreams ended up due to the lack of money and transportation after a brief stint at Merced College. And then, you know, we're gonna let him take it from there, you guys, because I want you guys to hear it from the words of this man himself, you guys, Mr. Jacob Stitch Duran. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate it. How you doing, Ferris?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
So, you know, you have a beautiful, beautiful story, and I want you to share with everyone that hasn't actually gotten to know who Jacob Stitch Duran is. So why don't you go ahead and pick up where I left off?
Yeah, it's pretty much, you know, I started off as a farm worker. That's what makes me proud, and that's what makes the person that I am, right? And literally, as you look at my birth certificate, the address is CPC number 12. That's for the California Packing Company, number 12, right? So, you know, I come from humble beginnings, and but we've all come somehow from humble beginnings, but we've all had dreams. And my dreams were always to play professional baseball. And, you know, every summer when the farm workers would come in from Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, they would come work the crops with us. A lot of them were baseball players from Mexico. And I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And we'd play these Sunday games. So I could play baseball. But I walked down to a college and didn't have a ride. My Merced was 9 miles away from my little town of Panada. So I would go to school with friends. After school, they would leave and I'd stay in a practice and I would have to kind of hitchhike back, right? But growing up as a farm worker, I was very naive. So I didn't understand anything about grants and scholarships and all that to talk to the coach, you know, and teachers. So I joined the Air Force. And that was in 1972. And 1974, they stationed me in a place called Thailand. And I didn't know what Thailand was. I was pretty naive. But that was during the Bruce Lee era. So I always said if I went into the Orient, I would want to study the martial arts. And so I had friends that were already stationed there like 3 months before me. So they were already acclimated. So they invited me downtown in Banchan to see some fights. I'm thinking it's boxing. I see this guy throw a kick, knock a guy out, and I said, I'm in, you know. So that following Monday on the base, they had Taekwondo for the GIs, right? Well, Taekwondo Thailand sounds the same. I didn't know that Taekwondo was a Korean art. But the Koreans left and the Thais took over, and then they transitioned us into the Muay Thai system with Taekwondo skills, which worked out to my advantage. So when I got back to the States, I got into boxing just to improve my hands and formulate a whole program. And then I opened up my own school of kickboxing, ASK, the American School of Kickboxing. Mm-hmm. And that's where I learned. I was a trainer. I managed the guys. I promoted fights, but I learned to be a cutman for economics. Plus I wanted to know the whole aspect, and being a cutman just kind of floated to the top. And 26 years ago, I packed up my family and moved to Las Vegas. And here I am talking to you.
I love that. And so what I love the most through your story, because I've known you for quite some time, is you're a family man. You're an absolute family man. And I love that about you. I think, you know, when I bumped into you just not too long ago at Self-Made Training Facility, you were getting tacos for your family.
Yeah.
So, and you just happened to stumble across us, and I was like, Stitch, and we had Jason Walton in the corner with me, and I was like, look, brother, Stitch is here. So it was like no accidents, right? But I love that you just spoke about your family. So I want to talk about your family a little bit, because, you know, to be the man that you are today, I'm sure there was a lot of sacrifices that went in, and you packed up your entire family. They've always been on your side with this. So I want to talk about that. So what was the most challenging thing for you and your family during the stage of your life?
Well, let's go to my immediate family, my brothers, my sisters, my mother, my father, my uncle, that, you know, we literally put in the trunk of the car to cross him over from Juarez, Mexico to El Paso to bring him across. So we brought him illegally, so I understand, you know, but, you know, my parents were there were farm workers. My father had, but they were leaders in their own mind. My father was always the foreman, so he would hire workers to work the crops, and he would teach them whatever they had to do. So he had those leader qualities. Same thing with my mother, and but they were always for the rights of the people, and that's something that has always stuck with me. And you know, so what I am is because of them, and the same thing with my brothers and sisters. You know, we've always been giving back and, you know, just kind of treating people with respect and all that. But my family that I have now with my children and my wife, I worked the corporate job. I worked for RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company for like 23 years. But my dream, when I was back in Fairfield, I had my school of kickboxing. So I had fighters and I traveled the world and I worked with boxers and all that, but I was good at what I did. So my dream was always to make it to Las Vegas, and I put in for a job transfer. And I waited about a year, and finally I get a call and say, look, there's an opening in Las Vegas, but you got to be there in a week. And that's kind of tough to do. So I called the manager, and he gave me 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, Tiffany and Ferris, in 2 weeks, I transferred my school to a student. I sold my house. I put my family in a U-Haul, and we drove 9 hours to Las Vegas. And then I took like a $25,000 a year cut and pay. But my wife and my children supported me. Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
Take the pain, right? Yeah. And but my wife and my kids supported me, and you know, my brother lived there, and I remember one time he comes to the house and my wife is crying, and you know, he thought we got into a fight, and it wasn't that. It's just that I couldn't pay my rent. So I'll never forget. He lent me $3,000 right off the bat, and from that point, I never looked back. Paid him back with interest, but I've never looked back. And you know, sometimes you got to take the pain to get where you got to get.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, catapulting into your career from that point. Let's talk about the pain. Let's talk about the pain. So I want you to really talk about, you know, during that time of your life, you know, what type of moral did that instill in you moving forward?
Well, I've always had the morals. It was just that, you know, I just wanted to apply them in the boxing capital of the world, right? And so I came with those characters, and I didn't come to be a trainer, though I had those qualities because I was a trainer before I was a cutman. And because I thought all the great trainers in the world were here in Las Vegas, the boxing capital of the world. And at that time, it was only boxing, no MMA. And I started seeing guys work, and I started doing pads for guys, Mike McCallum, Johnny Tapia, and then I started working as a trainer. But then my job I couldn't give you 150%. So they would hire me, you know, in between work and all that. But coming to the top, my coming out fight was Raul Marquez fought Keith Mullins. Raul Marquez was the IBF, I think, middleweight champion. He ended up with 5 cuts, 1 or 2 big ones, 2 here and 1 here. I kept him in the game. He defended his title with something like 70 stitches. And that's when people said, "Damn, who is this guy?" You know, and I haven't turned back since.
So, and what made you want to be the best cut man in the industry? Because obviously you had baseball dreams, you had really big dreams that financially, you know, you couldn't get into that field, but you just switched it because, you know, you did have that twinkle in your eye that you just knew you were meant for more. So what made you want to be the best cut man in the industry, seeing that you grew up in the fighting industry alone, but what made you want to be the best cut man in the industry?
Well, I didn't think I was going to be the best cut man. I just wanted to be good at what I did, right? And I couldn't afford to go back, so I had to go forward because I took such an economic drop in pay. But when I started working with these top professional boxers, what I lost, I compensated through working with them. But yeah, I guess in anything I always wanted to do, Tiffany and Ferris, is I always wanted to do it. If you're going to do it, you got to do it right. So I tell my kids it's so much easier to do things the right way than to do the wrong things and then try to cover them. So I've always tried to do things the right way and respect people. And I think through performance, you know, wrapping good hands and working cuts, but I think respecting people is really what has helped me get me to the top.
Yeah. And, you know, we're going to get into that a little bit because you have the utmost respect when it comes to, you know, what you do. And did you ever, during that time though, did you ever want to be a fighter yourself, seeing that you've trained so many amazing fighters, being through that, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Did you ever want to be a fighter at any time?
Well, when I was in Thailand, I had a couple. Then it was karate. I mean, Muay Thai was non-existent, right? But they had karate on bases, so I joined those, and literally I beat the crap out of these guys, right, with just my legs. And
Yes.
then when I got back to the States, I was stationed in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I joined a tournament up there, and I think I fought 3 guys, and I threw like a total of 5 kicks and put them all out, And one guy, the guy that I fought for, I guess the championship, says, you're kicking too hard. And at that point, I didn't understand point karate, right? So I was slamming these guys, and hurting them. And but being that I had studied taekwondo with the guy for the championship, I threw a stepping side kick right in the ribs and kind of threw him out. And we had to take the old Karate Kid timeout where I'm facing away from him on my knees, and and we come back and we start, and then I threw a roundhouse in the same spot. That was it. That was my championship. So, but no, kickboxing was just getting started in the States. It was nothing more in the Midwest than anything else, and some in the East Coast. But I had an 8-to-5 job, and I was happy with that. And it never really dawned on me. But I guess to be where I'm at, I've taken the pain. I understand. I've given the pain, and I've taken the pain, and I've gone through the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory. So I have that under my belt that I can relate with fighters. So I understand.
Yeah, leave it to Stitch Duran to open up kickboxing division. They're like, we don't know what to do with this, so we're just going to call it kickboxing.
Yeah.
I love that. So did you ever have like an awe moment where you looked around and said, wow, I can't believe I'm a part of this?
Yeah, there's been many moments, from the movies with Rocky, Sylvester Stallone. But I think one big moment was I went to Japan to work a pride fight, actually New Japan Pro Wrestling with Josh Barnett, and we're in the Tokyo Dome. And I walk in, and I think the Tokyo Dome holds something like 90,000 people, and it was jam-packed. And I'm right at ringside, and I'm looking up, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm that little Chicano kid from Canada, and here I am in Tokyo in front of 90,000 people in the Tokyo Dome. That really, I think, was the significant point where I said, I've kind of made it. But even with when I did Creed with Sylvester Stallone, I'm working side by side with him. Yeah, I'm working side by side with him and Michael B. Jordan for 6 weeks, and I tell Sly, I said, I can't sleep at nights, and he says, what's wrong? I said, I'm in my room, 6 weeks here, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I got Sylvester Stallone, Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Coogler that wrote and directed Creed. He also directed Black Panther. But he says, you know what, you earned it. And at that point, I thought, you know what, he's right. I did. I paid my dues to get where I'm at. And I'm just warming up, I tell people, so things are just getting better.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I know you're not done. There's so much more. And you're at the tender age of
60. I'll be 69 this year, or this month. And well, we're not in December yet, huh?
My goodness.
Yeah.
Guys, if you're watching this on the YouTube, he's 69. That's incredible. Absolutely amazing. And so let's talk about some of the fighters that you've trained. You've worked with a lot, and you've worked with a lot of people. Who would you say are your favorite fighters that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's that's like saying I like you better than Ferris. I can't say that. But I've had a lot of great moments. With well, obviously in boxing. Let's just go with boxing. It's Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko. They just classy people. But I've done so many. Fedor Emelianenko was an honor to work with him. But Josh Barnett, when he left the UFC, brought me on to work with him for the New Japan Pro Wrestling, the Pride fights, and all that. And as a character, as a person, he's top of the line. He would fly. We would go to Japan. He'd be on business, and of course, I'd be on coach. And he'd come in and bring me the cheese and the grapes and the stuff that they were munching on in first class. And he didn't have to do that. But so many guys. I mean, it's to the point now, Tiffany. If you ask me about a fighter, I'll tell you a story.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love the most. And I want to get there because you have an undeniable bond with these fighters. And, the one thing that I really want to talk about is the emotional aspect and the mindset that goes into all of this, because you are, in a sense, the minute you walk in the room, it's like everything stops. And to that fighter, it's real. Yeah. Everything that they've just trained their entire, life for that moment, because every moment is different. And as soon as you walk into that room, that fighter knows, all right, it's time. It's time. And in that moment, you're also that grounding space. You're rapping, you're having those conversations. Their head is down or they're looking at you in the eye. There's a lot going on. And I want to talk about that moment because it's also a moment for you that I mean, you see on the other end, you see the fighters, but I want to talk about you. What is going through your mind in this moment before you go and see those fighters?
Yeah, that's the adrenaline rush within ourselves. This is what we live for, right? But I guess as we go back, Frank Mir probably had the best quote outside of Vitor Belfort of that one. But Frank Mir says, "When I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, my stomach just drops because I know it's time to fight." So that's a true statement. But what I do is when I'm wrapping their hands, I'll shoot the shit with them. I'll break them out of that because I know it's a tough position.
Yeah.
I've had fighters, and I won't throw a name out, that have literally cried as I'm wrapping their hands because I understand it's an emotional thing. It's an adrenaline thing. So I just stop and I finish, let him get his thing off, and I'll give him a hug, and I'll say, "Look, man, I'm here to take care of you. Don't worry about nothing. You go out there." But, one of the major factors, Tiffany and Ferris, that kind of gave me a reality of what importance I bring to these fighters is when Lyoto Machida fought Rashad Evans, and he beat him for the title, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you remember Lyoto Machida's father, he's very Japanese, very proud, shogunnish type of guy. So I go in the dressing room after the fight, and I congratulate him. And his father is sitting there very, very proud. And he says, "Stitch, muito obrigado, thank you, I told him congratulations." And he says, "Stitch, in the ring, you are my father." Mm-hmm. And his father looks at me and kind of, I agree, concur. Carol Parisian, when he fought Drew Fickett, it was at I think the Marine base, when he ended up with a big old gash, and he messed up because he's looking at the big screen, and he goes like this, and he opens it up, right? Yeah. And Manny Gambarian I had just met Manny that day, and Neil, and they were like this much experience when it came to working corners. So my job as a cutman is not to give instructions, but I knew that they were in dire straits there because Carol was freaking out because of that cut. Manny and Neil didn't know what to do outside of that, so I took control. And I said, "Well, look, man, Carol, don't worry about nothing, man. The cut's okay. You go out there and you just stay on the stand-up, and you say, yeah, they're winning the fight." But going shows later, I'm doing a show at the MGM, and I see Carol and his father, and I go and I say hi to Carol, and he introduces me to his father. And, Armenian people are like Mexican people, very family-oriented.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So his father says, "Thank you for taking care of my son." He goes, "I want to invite you to my house for dinner." And I thought that was such a statement, a good statement. And, he lives in LA and I live in Las Vegas. And I knew the invitation was there, and I knew it probably wouldn't happen, but he offered that to us, to me. And I thought that was the moment. Obviously, it was important because I'm presenting it to you, And so those moments, are tremendous. Going into Vladimir Klitschko when he fought Anthony Joshua, this same thing that Lyoto taught me, I've used that because I know it affected them. And but Vladimir Klitschko's fighting Anthony Joshua, 90,000 people, Wembley Stadium, and I don't see Vladimir to the weigh-ins. But I've been with him for like 10, 12 years, and he knows if I say something, it's the truth. I don't say much, but when I say it, it's the truth. And so I'm talking to Vladimir and Vitaly before the weigh-ins, and right before we go out, I put my arm on Vladimir, and I say that Lyoto thing. I said, "Vladimir, don't worry about nothing. Tomorrow, I'm going to take care of you like you're my son." And because I know, the night before a fight, these fighters are going through all these emotions are running through their head, their adrenaline. Yeah. So here I am in front of 90,000 people. Before Michael Buffer does the announcements, I'm putting the final Vaseline on Vladimir, and we're like this far apart. And he says, "You could call me son." And it gave me chills, but I knew that I had gotten into his mind that night before, and it was probably one of the best performances he ever had in his whole career. And he says, he called me a week later and said, "Daddy!" So I knew I had an effect on these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have an effect on the world. I think that everybody knows that when you come in, it's a different story. You come in with that love, that genuine love, and it's irreplaceable. And that's why you are the best at what you do, is because you come from that emotional space of, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what's behind, what's in front. In this moment, it's about them, and that you connect in that moment and letting them know that it's going to be okay no matter what, that you're going to take care of them. And, it is really special. I want to talk about a little bit about the pain aspect, because all fighters have a story, right? You have a story. I have a story. Ferris has a story. And what's really beautiful is when you can come out of these stories and these pain aspects. I want to talk about, because you've gone through a lot and you've worked very hard to where you've gotten. Even, especially with the UFC, you've really worked your way up through the UFC. And I want to talk about that moment in your life, because I know there was a lot of transition between, politics, income. There was a lot of different things that had happened. Reebok came in, and it was, I'm friends with a lot of these fighters, so I know that it wasn't an easy transition across the board. So I want to talk about that time in your life, because that right there is something that you've sacrificed so much. You have been there every step of the way with these fighters. You have an emotional attachment to the UFC as well. So during that time, with everything in transition, what was that pain moment for you? Because I know that, I'm sure that you've experienced a couple of lows during that time.
Yeah, there were. But let me give you one more story, because I think it's important. Vanderlei Silva. I love Vanderlei Silva. Shogun, Vanderlei.
We love all of them. I love them all.
Yeah, Verdun, all these guys, when we were doing the shows in Japan, they would call me Santana. Carlos Santana, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. You do look like him.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, yeah.
So Vanderlei is fighting Chuck Liddell, and I'm working the corner with Chuck Liddell. But about a week before, I see Vanderlei, and we're friends, and I say, Vanderlei, I want to give you good karma. It's my birthday that day. I want to wish you good luck and give you good karma. So, I did that. And so Leon Tabbs, the original cutman for the UFC, is working Vanderlei's corner, and I'm working with Chuck Liddell. And these guys are probably one of my top 3 brutal fights that I've seen. These guys are they're cracking each other, and you can hear those punches, and Chuck gets a cut, and I take care of him. And so after the fight, I clean up Chuck, and I go to Vanderlei, and he's all swollen up, and Leon is working on him. And I said, Vanderlei, how are you doing? Oh, no, Stitch, I'm okay. And right after this, hardest probably fight he's ever been, he says, Stitch, right in the middle of the ring, Stitch, happy birthday. Man, if that didn't get me, nothing did, But that just shows the kind of emotion that these guys give me, Many times these guys have told me they love me. So fast forward into what happened with the UFC. I guess that's what you're getting at, right? So let's talk.
Yeah.
Right. Let's
Just
talk.
a little bit. If I can interject before you go into it, because I know it's kind of a controversial thing, and it's so massive. And I honestly, it's, I'll say it, shame on them. But what I keep hearing from you, and it's just something that's coming up, is just you're like a guardian angel to these people. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, boxing, whether it's MMA, whether it was UFC, all these fighters over the years. Even your family, we go way back. You're like, hey, I brought, my uncle over in the trunk of a car. Like, you're like this guardian that calms these people, that gives these people this sense of peace and this warmth and this welcome that makes them feel like, okay, cool, I can go ahead and do this. And I just think that's so amazing that after all of these years, whether this was a dream that you wanted to do, something that you just fell into, it's like you're just like this guardian angel to all of these people, and I know all of them are so thankful. So having those moments where it's like those little moments where he's like, happy birthday, or call me son, or that just must feel so good inside to where you're warm. Like every time you talk about this stuff, like I'm getting chills, because I'm like, oh my gosh, and it's just, you're this guardian. So transition, obviously, let's talk UFC, take it from there.
Yeah, well, but you're right, and giving back. I think that's the whole thing for us is those are structures that my parents had. Like say we were all farm workers, and when all these farm workers would come into town, they would come to work the fields, but there was no guidance. They just come to work the fields, and there'd be times when the guys would be working the fields, and I remember that, I'd be picking peaches or nectarines, and for lunch, these guys would be eating the food that they were picking. That was their lunch. And so we always gave back. But fast forward, so I knew Dana White from before the UFC. You know, we were always in the gyms. I was training fighters, and he was more or less doing pads and for the housewives of the executives and the executives. But shit, he was making more money than us, so he was, you know. But nonetheless, I was doing a K1 at the Bellagio, and I think Kima was fighting Bob Sapp, and Dana was in the audience, you know. And I always got along great with Dana, you know. So he says, Stitch, give me your card. He goes, we bought the UFC. And the next day he gives me a call and asked if I'd be interested in being a cutman along with Leon Taz, which was the original cutman from UFC #1. They brought him on board. I knew zero about MMA, but it was work as a cutman, and that's what I do, right? So I came on board. Burt Watson, of course, was the coordinator. So it was Burt Watson, Leon Taz, and myself. And literally the program that you see the UFC use with cutmen, the program you see all martial arts, including bare knuckle fights, the system they use for cutmen is the one that we designed. We designed it ourselves as how we're gonna wrap the fighter's hands, because, you know, and I gotta give Dana credit, to bring me in, because he knew that MMA was such a new sport that these guys didn't know how to wrap hands, much less work cuts. So being that we were boxing people, we knew those type of things. So he brought us in, and it worked out good where it was just Leon Tabs and myself, and more people wanted us to wrap hands. More people wanted me to wrap their hands. And so we brought in down house, and from there, you know, now I think everybody uses 4 or 5 cutmen, but it's the same system that we put together. So things were going great, you know. Sponsors, we had sponsors. I started out with Tap Out, and as a matter of fact, Tap Out, if you remember, people probably don't know this, but they are the ones, Charles Mask is the one that designed my vest. And that vest is what a lot of people are using. Well, that system, putting their sponsors and all that, but he's the one that designed it. And we got to a point where he would make me a vest, and after a fight, I would pick out an audience, autograph it, and give it to them, right? So Tap Out was my first sponsor, Zions, you know, and then Mark Zucker from One More Round, when I did the Balboa movie, he looked at that where Rocky is telling his son, I gotta go one more round. He said, you know what, that's so instrumental in any part of life. So he got Matt Hughes, he sponsored Matt Hughes, and Matt Hughes is the one that told Mark, I said, look, if anybody gives a fighter one more round, it's Stitch. So he called me and he sponsored me. And for the longest time, I needed the UFC to make my money through the sponsors. I was making a lot more money through sponsors than I was through the UFC. And fast forward, then they go into the Reebok deal. And of course, you know, Tiffany, because you were in the trenches there, the fighters and the trainers, everybody hated it because fighters were losing a lot of money, right? And so everybody was hating it, and they called the cutmen, and the fighters are giving them some compensation by the amount of fights that you have, which was garbage for the most part. Well, they get the cutmen together, and they say, you know what? We were with Reebok. You got to get rid of your sponsors. And I always represented all the cutmen. If I got a sponsor, let's say from Tap Out, they don't look. How about Leon and how about House? And you know, so I always represented them, and that's part of me. My parents being leaders, right? Yeah. But they said, well, there's no money in the kitty. So at that point, the fighters are hating it. The fans are hating it. The media's they're getting a lot of backlash. And John Nash from Bloody Elbow calls me. He sends me a message and says, would you be interested in doing an interview on how the Reebok deal affected the cutmen? And boom, I go back to the past of when my parents were in the boycotting of Gallo and grapes and lettuce because of the bad practices. Cesar Chavez was the leader of that. And I remember as a young 12-year-old kid, when they did the Huelga March from Delano to Sacramento to protest unfair practices, we participated in that, you know. And so when that happened, I thought about it and I said, you know what? I have to. You know, my parents would be ashamed of me if I didn't speak up for the rights of us. So I thought, the article interview was very politically correct. Being that I worked with R.J. Reynolds for 23 years, I knew how to be corporate America. Right. But that article went viral, just kind of exploded, and people are effing Dana, effing UFC, effing Reebok, and I'm getting messages from all over the world and supporting me and what have you not. So I'm at Costco with my wife, and we're shopping, and I get a phone call from one of the staff members of the UFC. My friends, we're all friends. And he said, hey, do you have time to talk? And I knew what the conversation was about because there was hundreds of messages. And I said, nah, you know what? I'll be home. Give me about an hour. Yeah. So I get home, and both Jess and Mark call me, and his voice is cracking. And the only thing he says is, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. And kind of expected it. I kind of put myself out. But I'm getting tons of tweets and messages. And the first one that I get, it's a guy named David Estrada. And I said, I want you to be the first to know that the UFC just let me go about speaking out about the Reebok deal. Now I got to find a new job. Man, that went viral like mega big. I'm getting offers from all over the world.
Right.
The guy from Reebok is calling me, and he's apologizing, saying that he has nothing to do with it. And so the emotions were going like this. I mean, it's crazy. Bad Boy Robin, which was my sponsor, Robin Offner from Bad Boy called me, and I'm on my way to do a radio interview at the Mandalay Bay at MMA Junkie Radio. My son is driving, my wife's in the passenger seat, and I'm in the back because I'm getting all these messages. And Robin says, hey, Stitch, we'd like to do something for you. We'd like to create a shirt, and then all the proceeds go to you. Man, I started crying. The adrenaline, the positive energy, and that kind of hit me. And then, but there was another guy, Robbie, that does Motivational Monday, motivational speaking on Monday, Motivational Monday he called it. And he said, today's topic will be about a good friend of mine, Stitch Duran, who stood up for what he thought was right and this and that, and in doing so lost his job. And I start crying again, and my wife walks right here in the same room I'm speaking to you. My wife walks into the room, and she said, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I let her listen to that Motivational Monday, and she starts crying. So it was quite emotional, but as I look at it in the long run, the best thing that ever happened to me was for them to let me go under these circumstances. And when I did the first Creed movie, Ferris, I think you'll like this story. Wesley Snipes comes up to me after you go see the premiere, and then you have an after movie party, right? Wesley Snipes comes up to me, shakes my hand, and says, the only thing he said is, the UFC did you wrong. So I knew that the world knew.
Yes, see? Not the only one. I mean, it's like they did you wrong, but they also, like, that door closing has opened so many things for you to where it's like, okay, go through a little bit of this to experience what I'm really, really meant to do. So I love that. See, I'm not the only one.
No, but there's another one now. And with the 2 weeks ago, because I'm doing the top rank shows in the bubble at the MGM, and it's all boxing, right? Well, Andres, one of the trainers famous trainers from Brazil that trains a lot of these Brazilian fighters, was one of the coaches. And we're talking. And he said, Stitch, we, the trainers, and we, the fighters, we respect you so much because we couldn't say what you said because we would lose our positions, our jobs. And coming from him years later, it's been like 5 years, for him to say that just brought so much satisfaction to me, that knowing that what I did was the right thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything ever wrong in standing up for what you believe in. That's why you're in America, and
right.
And that's why we have these big dreams and aspirations, and then just to not stand up for what we believe in. Like you said, you have created and earned who you are today. That would be silly of you not to stand up for what you believe in and what you think is right. So, and yeah, I mean, look at what it's done for you. It's closed a door, and yes, it's a painful experience, I'm sure, but in those moments you have to give up to go up. And, going through your story now, and, gosh, it's incredible. What I want to know though, is I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, because looking at your entire, getting kicked in the face left and right, gouges, you just see everything, right? So what is one thing that what you do is you have to have a strong stomach for. What is your biggest fear, or most disgusting, I should say, moment that happens where you're like, okay, this one is going to require some like mustering up strength? When was that moment for you?
Well, there's been quite a few, but I think that's, and people ask, what's the number one thing of being a good cutman? Well, keeping your composure, number one, is key, right? But if you remember the first big, Forrest Griffin fighting Shogun, first UFC fighter fighting a Pride fighter.
Oh,
right?
so epic.
Yes. So, well, I'm working with Forrest because I worked with him from day one.
I love Forrest.
From the reality show, and when he fought Stephen Bonner, and
Mm-hmm.
to the point now, I'll give you a quick side. After that fight with Stephen Bonner, it's what made the UFC, right?
Right.
And then when I'm cleaning up Forrest, and he's bloody nose, but I'm working on him. And after the fight, we're standing there for the decision, and his coach says, "Stitch, I'm not gay, but I got to give you a kiss, man. Thanks for taking Forrest." Right. So that's just those type of moments, right? And
right.
But yeah, it just so many great moments. I don't know. I think Forrest, when he fought Shogun, that big old cut, and as you see, Tiffany, that big vein you have on your forehead right there, well, that vein popped, right? And that's the worst because it's a big vein. The blood, it's extremely tough to stop, and the blood gets in your eyes. So I'm sitting there with Don House and Dana White's father, and
I remember that.
I go in there. Yeah, I go in there and I use the Avitine, which is a coagulant. I use the thrombin or the adrenaline chloride, which is a vasoconstrictor. I used everything in the kitchen sink to stop it. And he ended up winning the fight. But, like a week later, I get a nice letter from Forrest and a nice gift certificate to a restaurant. So that was a very, very special moment. But Jay Haran, when he fought Jonathan Goulet, that was the bloodiest fight I've ever worked in my life, right? And if you look at that canvas, it's in Randy Couture's gym.
Right.
But same thing. He took a knee and got that same cut, and there's so much blood from the top of their head to the bottom of the feet, both fighters, that it made me nauseated. But at that time, the doctor asked me, as I'm working on him, "Stitch, what do you think?" "Oh, no, I got it under control. And I'm putting the adrenaline Vaseline on it, and I cover it up. And as soon as I cover it up, the blood just spurts out like a leak in the thing. That was a crazy moment for me, but it did. So much blood, it made me nauseated.
Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm glad that you answered that because there's been tons of those, but I remember those fights like yesterday. So yes, I can definitely agree with you on some of that. But yes, like you said, composure is everything. So I want to talk about, you say you have big dreams and you're not done yet. So let's talk about what's to come coming out of all of this and what you're working on, what you're most excited about.
Well, there's things just happen. And to this point, I swear I've never asked for one job. Things just happen, right? And I let them happen, so I just kind of go and I get to determine what's this and what's not. Anyway, so I had written a book called From the Fields to the Garden because I grew up as a farm worker and my goal was to make it to Madison Square Garden. So I did one, and the second one is after the UFC let me go. So From the Fields to the Garden 1 and 2, and that's available at Amazon.com. It's a good book, really. Anyway, that's being turned into a documentary, and we started filming. Originally, the Garden, New York, which was my goal, was going to be our last point of filming. But we got for boxing, Andre Ward, Vladimir Klitschko, Mike Tyson. We got Anderson Silva, Triple G, Cain Velasquez, guys, Michael B. Jordan, guys we're going to interview. So, but as soon as I signed with this group, a week later, find out that Triple G is fighting, of all places, Madison Square Garden. So these guys got so excited, so they readjusted their budget, which would have been the last of the filming, and we took a crew to New York, and the Garden, Triple G, and the Zone all gave us all access. So the footage that we needed, which is the end of the documentary, we got. And then this COVID kicked in. So just last week, the producer called me and says, "Can we start doing interviews again, you think, with this COVID and all that?" And Andre Ward is is one of the commentators for ESPN that's here in the bubble with us. And I spoke to Andre, and yeah, December the 12th, we're going to interview him. And then, so we'll continue doing that. But in that process also, there was another group that touched bases with Gerald, the producer, about doing a segment or a series called The Rap with Stitch Duran, where I would wrap your hands and we would talk just, as BJ Penn, talk story. And so I was presenting that to Andre, and Andre got so excited that he wants to be the one to do the pilot for this. So that's happening right there, right? Also, I'm working with a group called CBD Science, and they created a cream for cuts. So once you get cut, you get sewn up, you apply the cream in it. It has stem cell, has collagen, vitamin E,
Very cool.
CBD. So it accelerates the healing process.
Yes.
So when they called me, I asked them, because everybody has CBD, everybody, right? I said, well, what proof source do you have? And that's going back to me being in marketing and sales at RJ Reynolds. What proof source? Well, he says, that's what we called you. I said, all right, well, look, I'm doing the bare knuckle fights. If you are interested, I'll talk to Dave Feldman. You go over there, and because all these guys, 70% cut ratio is high. So they get sewn up in the dressing room, take a picture of them, give them the cream. They apply it every day. A week later, they send a picture, and the results have been tremendous. So now we just, this week, started going out to market. So it's called the Cut Cream. It's available at CBD Science. And so, all these things are happening. I'm waiting for Creed 3. And, Michael B. Jordan, I was telling him, because like I said, I spent every day wrapping his hands 6 weeks.
Great job.
And so I told Michael how proud I was of him and all that. And he said, Stitch, we went from being actors to writers, producers, and directors. And he's looking at me like I'm looking at you. He says, I'm directing Creed 3, and you're with me as long as you want. And then this COVID kicked in, so we'll see what happens. But
this COVID, I'm telling you, don't get me started.
yeah, exactly. So
for that, because
Thursday I'm going to LA. I'm working with Badu Jack. He's on the Mike Tyson undercard. So that's my first time leaving, because I'm a little still apprehensive of traveling and all that.
Right.
But I'm working the fights at the Bubble with the Top Rank. I've done 23 shows with them since June, and they're all on ESPN. And, so under these bad circumstances, I'm doing okay. I've been blessed.
Yes, absolutely. It sounds like it. And what I will say with that cream alone, you having stem cells is what really sets the bar, because that's the healing aspect that you're seeing, that you're getting those results from. So that's really special. So anyone can use it. I'm like, oh, gosh, I could probably use some at home. It's like, it's Neosporin on steroids. So
yeah, you're right. And the thing about it, it's not so much more for athletes. It's the athletes that we're using the proof source, because it works for these guys that get major cuts. It's going to work for you when you get your plastic surgery or you get minor surgery. And so it's directed towards people in the medical, anybody that gets cut. But it works well, and that's why I'm glad to be supporting them.
I love that. So awesome. Congratulations on everything. I knew you had something up your sleeve. We're going to get through this COVID, obviously. We're going to, shine brighter than ever. I think as a nation, we're going through this, just like anything else, we're going through this to overcome. And whoever would have thought we'd be alive during a time like now, it's really crazy to look back. But talking about a little bit about this, what is your biggest fear? What is one thing that, you just can't overcome, or you are working on overcoming, or you constantly do step into those fears? So what is that one fear for you?
I kind of learned to accept everything as it comes. I'm not scared of death. I've done crazy shit like ayahuasca and all kinds of stuff. So, I challenge things as they come to me, and no, I'm not really scared of anything.
I'm glad you just.
I'm so happy you said that. We literally, our last episodes were with a good friend of ours, Michael O'Shea, and he's all about plant medicine and healing. So the fact that you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so incredible. Like, to hear you're just like, I'm not scared of death. I'm not scared of this. I've done crazy things, and that's awesome. You're just I'm so glad that we did this.
But to bounce back off of ayahuasca, let's, because that right there. So speaking of Michael O'Shea about, he actually left, he was huge here in Las Vegas when it came to hospitality. He actually left to South America to go study for months. And he actually can create the medicine now. He said he's had over 20 ceremonies and every single one has been different. And when I have spoken to him, he does also have that I'm not afraid of anything, because he's not afraid of death. He's not afraid. He loves fears, but he also has conquered them through this experience. So let's talk about your ayahuasca experience. And I feel like we're being called, Ferris. We've heard this too much now with ayahuasca and plant medicine. Oh man, Stitch, what did you just do? But let's talk about your experience, because I want to talk about how you went through that and how many times you've done it, and then also what you've learned from it.
Yeah, well, they're one of the cutmen that used to work for Strikeforce, and then when the UFC bought Strikeforce, they brought him in. Weezy is actually a shaman. He's but when we went to do the UFC in Mexico City, he introduced me to his head shaman, and we went to the pyramids, and every step, every platform that we walked the pyramids, but every platform he walked us around the pyramid and explained everything through. I mean, this guy was phenomenal, right? So we did it through all the steps and all that. And after that, he invited us to go eat. We had ant eggs, which was a delicacy for the Aztecs. But Weezy was always trying to say, you got to try it. You got to try it. Weezy used to live in San Jose. So there's Indian Canyon, which is actually a native land. And it was done by the natives there. So some of the UFC, some of the MMA guys had done it. So I wanted to. Finally, I had a weekend off, and he said, "All right, you gotta eat fruits and vegetables and water for a week, clean out your system and what have you not." So I flew to San Jose, rented a car, went up to Indian Mountain, and there they're setting up the teepee. Literally, the teepee, they're putting the stuff on it. They get the grass for the inside for the sweat lodge, right? They get the lava rocks and all that. And so the first night, we do that. We go into the sweat lodge, and it's pitch black in there, and Weezy is doing his services, and I'm next to him. And you can't stretch your legs out because you'll get burnt by the lava rocks. And it's dark, and some people, they can't stand the heat and all that. And I'm taking the pain, and finally it's over, and I'm ready to walk out. And Weezy says, no, one more. Oh shit, man, I got to do it one more time, right? So I do that, and in the nighttime, you smoke your joint and all that before you go in and all that. But in the nighttime, we set up our tents, right? Weezy says, buy a tent. We'll say they had to set it up for me because I know nothing about that. I go lay in my tent, and I say, hey, this is too hard here. So I go into my vehicle, and I put the seat back, and I lay down in my car. But I had my shoes outside, and I get up about 3 in the morning to go to the bathroom with one of my sandals, and one of my shoes are gone. The raccoons had gotten them. And so finally I found them. Well, the next day we go into a big giant meadow, and I take my pad there, and you drink the ayahuasca, and you just kind of go into your own journeys, right? And I remember there was a girl that was next to me, and I kind of look at her, and her eyes are closed and tears are coming down her eyes. So I don't know what she was going through. And there was another guy that was screaming, and he was going through his moments. And so they moved me away, into an area. But I went through some journeys, and there was always this one little blue light that I saw that I always said it was a blue I'd never seen before. And there was always like an eagle, that was in. But Weezy, I told him that. And he said, no, but you had a good trip, the light, that's the end of the tunnel, but the eagle, that's your strength, and that's, this and that. And it really didn't hit on me till I took a Armed Forces Entertainment tour like a month later to Afghanistan with Georgian Ghost from MMA Junkie. There I got to see the warriors, the true warriors. These are the gladiators that go into battle. It's a life and death situation. It's not like fighters. Fighters come back, but I got to hear a lot of their stories. And, one guy from Croatia, he sees me and Jake Ellenberger and Amir Sadallah. Says, hey, guys, let's take a picture. And he tells Amir and Jake, said, look, no offense to you guys, I want to take a picture with Stitch. I don't know if it's because of Stitch or because I work with Crow Cop, right? But he puts his arm around me and he goes, no offense to you guys. He goes, I'm not a fighter, I'm a killer. And I'm thinking, wow, man, these are the real deals. Yeah. Another guy from Poland tells me, Stitch, I studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they gave me the common effect to accept that. And so that everything came to fruition, and that experience that I had with that just kind of let me know that I've always believed in different dimensions.
Right.
There's somehow you get that bang in your head and you get that, I think that's a little different dimension. But I've always believed in different dimensions, and I got to see it when I was in ayahuasca. Would I do it again? Yeah, of course. The cell, I'm game. But showing, you're talking about the guts, right? Well, we're doing this Armed Forces Entertainment. We're in Kyrgyzstan, and we go to the K9 unit, and they want to suit one of us up with the outfits and have the dog chase them, right? Well, Jake Ellenberger and Merced College, all these badass UFC guys were scared. And I said, well, I'm the oldest one. Let's do it. So that dog chased me down, and he tore me down like like a rag doll, but I was the first one to do it. And finally, after the dog got tired, they did it, But yeah, it was a great experience.
Wow. So you're basically saying that you've experienced your own death, and you know what that feels like. So, and you're okay with that, and you believe in different dimensions and, spiritual worlds, and you believe in God, correct?
Yes, of course you have to.
So, what I hear a lot of people say exactly, especially through that, and when people really understand like how it brings you closer to God. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people, Michael O'Shea, one specifics, just because he has so much knowledge around this. But in that moment, like, were you able to, cross over and talk to God and go through that experience, knowing that everything's going to be okay, looking at your afterlife?
Well, I don't think it was the thing of talking to God. I think that's, with religion. I don't think there's the person. It's not a person. It's a position that is understood, that you have to understand. And I think I understood that position. I don't know whether that blue light that I saw, that's a blue like I've never seen before, whether that was the dimension that actually creates God and all that. But I knew that, there's something that created us that I had to explore to see what got me here. And I think that that answered my questions. It's not, God is not a person. It's hard to explain.
It's an energy. It's what it is. It's what surrounds you. I get it.
It's the karma. It's the energy. It's, and I look at ourselves. I think I understand now that we are computers with flesh somehow, and because I tell my wife, I just got to, I have to deprogram because I have so much stuff in my head. If I could just delete some of it, the stuff that I don't need, then I would be able to accept more stuff. But yeah, I think that's the way I look at life. To me, when it comes to religions per se, Catholics, Christians, Buddhism, Muslims, and all that, those are just foundations to keep people on the right track. That I understand, and if there's good to it, then that's good. But as I look deeper into it and I take those away, what is God to me? Well, God is everything I just explained and everything that I saw.
I love that. That was one of the most powerful statements that I've had yet on Tiff Talk. So thank you so much for that. And Stitch, I'm really excited for what you have coming up. I do know that I'm going to have you back on here to talk about everything that's happening, what's new. And I really want to talk about, so there's a couple of things. You have a book on Amazon. Where can our guest find that?
Amazon.
And also with your cut development, so you also have your CBD creams and you also have wraps that you've also made. So is there a website that people can go to?
Yeah. I have my own tape, Stitch Premium Athletic Tape. Really, it's the best tape out there. And then I also created an end swell for the swelling, but that's available at Cutman for Hire Supplies. And they're the only ones that carry it, because through a dream, I had a dream and that's the way life works for me, right? I had a dream because I was busy traveling so much I couldn't, if you order tape from me, and I was in Germany. I couldn't get it to you till Monday when I got back, right? So through a dream, I called Juan Ramirez that owns Cutman for Hire Supplies, and I said, look, I had a dream, man. Would you be interested in handling my stuff? And of course, puts my name on his product, right? And so today, that we're working together. And so he carries all cornerman, cutman supplies, the best of the best, and then he carries my tape. Well, he just sent me a text last night that Jake Paul, that's fighting on the Tyson card, big YouTuber, just ordered some products from him.
Yeah, I know that kid is. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm gonna end it with this. Okay, it's gonna be a little bit different. Now that everyone knows, and we're gonna put it into the show notes where to find you. Obviously, get your book on Amazon. Yeah. Sometimes people have multiple sources of where they outlet their books. So I just wanted to double check. But what is one thing that nobody knows about you, whether it's something weird or something very, intriguing? What is one thing that no one knows about you?
Wrinkled clothes. They bug the shit out of me.
Stop.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fanatic with ironing, right? And my wife, okay, well, the irons, right? The irons, if you look at an iron, an average iron, it has like 20, 24 holes, right? My wife bought me one that has like 300. But then in doing that, she also bought me a steamer that's like an iron that, man, it's like it just came out of the cleaners. My son lives in Indianapolis. He called me the other day. He said, Dad, I forgot to tell you, he was in a wedding, but I had to iron all the guys' pants and put creases on them because they didn't know what to do. So ironing to me is a big thing. The way I look at life is if you start off fresh and ironed and you get wrinkled down the road, yeah, that's progression. That's good. But if you come out and you got wrinkled outfits, I got a problem with that. I was working with, I don't know if you remember Frida Gibbs. She was a world champion kickboxer. When Javier Mendez, Scott Coker did the shows, I worked the corner with her, and this one guy brings out a satin cornerman jacket, and he puts it on. It's all wrinkled. I didn't know the guy. And I said, no. I said, you got to take that off, man. I said, because this girl is on TV fighting for a world title, and you can't represent her like that. I made him take it off. So then to the point, yeah, don't come at me with wrinkled clothes because I won't put you in check.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
I love that though, because you think about it, he's the best cut man, but he's the best cut man. Think about it. Like he's got them cut creases.
Yes.
Like he's cutting. Like I'm sure his creases could like slice somebody, but I love that. You got to be super fresh. I love that.
That's right. And you guys, thank you so much for today's Stitch. We will definitely have you on again, especially after going over, what's to come. I'm excited for you. Thank you so much for your time today on Tiff Talks.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for everything. Yeah, I got a ton of stories. Hey, nobody has stories like I have, and I'm glad to share them.
That's right. Yep.
All right.
We're not done yet.
All right. Thank you, Will.